Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day everyone. So I will be evaluating all the research traditions that we have learned in MOOC. So the first one is survey. So survey is starting from, it can be anything from paper and pencil test to in-depth interviews. So the first advantage or the first strength that I can see in a survey, it's actually versatile. What I mean by versatile is that it actually help or enable us to ask questions to a lot of people with different types of questions, like open-ended, like a type questions. It's not just one particular close questions. So the next point is generalizable. What I mean by generalizable is actually when we do a survey, we can take a large sample from a population, from one population, and we can make that sample to be a representation of that population. But then I also notice survey have its downfall. The first one is the validity of the responses or the answers, because you see different people have different. Alright, moving on to experimental approach. It's actually good when it comes to control. When we do experimental research, we actually have more control over the extraneous variables, and it is a cause and effect relationship. So the ability of a researcher to control the independent variable that affect the dependent variable, it's really matters, and it's easier for the researchers. And then the strength is the replication. Replication here means the researcher can test over and over again. Does the independent variable really affect the dependent variable? But then the downfall or the shortcoming of this approach is generalization. What I mean by generalization means that experimental situation may not reiterate the real world situation. And for example, you do an experiment with these 10 people, but then these 10 people doesn't really represent the whole population. So that's one problem. And then the next problem is ethical issue. What I mean by ethical issue is deliberately allocate, for example, deliberately allocate children to an experimental group that they will have to be punished. For example, the Ivan Pavlov classical conditioning experiment. So that's one. The action research. Action research have its strength because it's relevant to the people in the real world, because it's actually changing people's life and improving the social justice. Such approach is unsuitable for people who don't work democratically, because action research actually requires you to work in groups, right? So the cause, effects, and the outcomes might not be generalizable. For example, you are studying why your students are not interested in coming to class, and the reason might be different with the students in the other side of the country, right? Grounded theory actually have a really interesting strengths. It's actually one of the methods to develop an understanding of the social phenomena, why people become. It's actually a process, a substantive theory that we develop become a grounded theory. But then the shortcoming is that the researcher need to be very skillful in using this approach, because not every substantive theory can become or can be developed into grounded theory. So that's one. Case studies has a really interesting fact because it's holistic. What I mean by holistic is that it's covered depth of analysis, and it give attention to the context, and it's actually longitudinal over time, meaning that the researcher can develop history of the case and provide a detail. But then the disadvantage or the cons of this approach is researcher's bias, because from the observation, interpretation that the researcher have can lead to the changes, and when the researcher is biased, he or she cannot see everything that is going on in the study. So it's actually dangerous, a bit dangerous and critical, and it also have a low external validity. What I mean by low external validity is the same shortcomings for the previous approach, that it cannot be generalizable. One case doesn't reiterate the justification of another case, you know. So we have this cost analysis. This cost analysis is really interesting because we are not only studying the text and the language, we study what beyond the language. And this cost analysis have its strength that other approach doesn't have, that it reveals the real motivation behind a text, and it's actually help us to understand the essence of the problem situation. But then it does not provide a scientific definite answers like other approaches, you know, because it plays with text, really have a factual hard science data. Yep. Ethnography. Ethnography have its strength where it helps us to not make an assumption of human action in social context, but then it has also its downfall where the researcher might be going native. What I mean by going native is the researcher is getting too involved in the community of the understudy, thus losing its objectivity and distance. And also the researcher can develop bias, and that is not good, because getting too close to the understudy and develop a closer relationship might cause bias, you know. And then phenomenology is actually really interesting because it provides a profound, detailed understanding of a single phenomena, and it's actually help us to see the experience, for example, like experience of a person and the reason. The downfall of it is, of course, the researcher's bias that I can think of. Last but not least, the approach of narrative. Narrative is actually really good because it can let the silent voices be heard, you know. For example, like you analyzing the experience of an individual, so that's good, that's one thing. But then it also have its cons where the authenticity of the research or the study can be questionable, because does one telling a true story, or does one being honest, but in order to save face or not being judged by the community or the researcher himself, does one, you know, fake a story. So that's one. The authenticity of the story is really important. And then it also causing ethical procedures. Do the researchers really asking consent from the person that is being interviewed or that is being studied? So validation for reason, it's one thing. So one approach that I found appealing to me and really interesting that suits my study is, of course, survey, because I'm doing the correlation between learning styles and the academic performance, a case study of introduction to psycholinguistics. So it's only natural when we say correlation, we definitely have to do a survey or a quantitative methods. And when we do a quantitative methods, definitely choose questionnaire, you know. And then it's only because the next reason because why I choose questionnaire, because it's a statistical analysis. I play with statistics, I play with numbers, so it's only natural that I use survey in my research, because it's a descriptive technique and also inferential technique. For the correlation, we're going to use the inferential technique for the data treatment. So hopefully that this video helps everyone to understand what I studied. And good luck everyone. Thank you.